All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to part 4 of the New York Cannabis Legalization Workshop series hosted by HempLab. We are lucky today to have a few friends that'll be presenting alongside of us, offering perspective. We have Jason Klimek, who is our board member of HempLab and has been kind of our in-house legal advisor. We have Mary Kruger, the executive director of NORML. And we have Penelope Hamilton, who has been a leader in the medical cannabis community within New York State and really on the East Coast and beyond. So we have some unique perspectives today that'll be informing this discussion. And as you've seen some of the promotional material, we are looking at Article 3, so medical cannabis. And there's definitely some new changes, some interesting stuff there, and really excited to dive in. Before we go too far in, I want to give a big shout out to our sponsoring member, Harris Beach Law Firm. They've been with us from the start. We really appreciate all your support. Also, big shout out to our founding business members, Boyle & Code, Mill, Singer Farms Naturals, the NYCGPA, Forefathers Innovation, Dawson Law Firm, Tracy Jong Law Firm, and Closed Loop Systems. And also a big shout out to our new business members, Beacon Skip, the CBRE, the FPR Group, and Hellendale. So today, as I said, we're going to be diving into the medical cannabis. If this is your first time on this workshop, folks who are on the Zoom call have access to us, the presenters. Feel free to drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We are also live streaming this video on social media. We're not really watching that at the moment, but feel free to follow alongside. Our goal is, from HempLab's perspective, is to offer information and connect experts to industry stakeholders or folks who have a vested interest in the most accessible way. So folks who are on this call on the Zoom have the opportunity to engage, and then folks out in the community, we're just happy to be sharing this information with you. Yeah, this is HempLab is a member-supported 501c3, so we have a bunch of individual members. Folks have been really showing up and supporting us this year through the pandemic. A bunch of business memberships and a sponsoring membership. Have a few cool things on the horizon that we're excited to share, with potential relationship or partnership with the Rochester Library, and trying to create more accessible platform for folks and disseminating knowledge the best way we can. Jason, I'd love for you to just give a quick introduction, and then I'll invite Mary and then Penelope, and then we'll dive into the content.
All right, thanks, Zach. Jason Klimek. I'm an attorney at Woods Oviatt Gilman in the cannabis and tax practice groups. Been working on the cannabis stuff for the past 3 years. I've worked with the industry groups, lots of legislators. Hopefully, we can get some input on the regulations, and really just trying to look out for New York and the industry that we're trying to create here, and make sure that we have a industry that everybody can participate in, and doesn't kind of consolidate to a few large players. So that's really the goal here, I think.
Great, thank you for being here, Jason. Mary, if you're done making your smoothie, I would love for you to just provide a little introduction.
Thanks, Zach. Hello, everyone. So as Zach said, my name is Mary Kruger. I am the founder and executive director of NORML. We are the Rochester chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. So for those of you who don't know, that is a cannabis consumer advocacy organization. Some obvious overlap between the industry and consumers, and just here to offer some voice and that perspective, and excited to have Penelope here today. We've been working closely with her the past couple of years. She leads our Western New York NORML chapter. I'll let Penelope speak more about herself, but she's really, as Zach said, has been championing the medical issues and advocating for patients around the state. So just huge gratitude to Penelope for making medical marijuana an issue for us to continue focusing on with legalization, instead of just focusing on the adult use aspect of it. So thank you to Penelope, and thanks again, Zach, for having me here.
Of course.
Oh,
that
and
appreciation. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, and happy birthday to Zach. It is Zach's birthday today. So
Hey.
happy birthday, Zach.
Thank
Happy
you, Mary.
birthday. There's so many birthdays that I know of people right now in May.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like Mary said, and I am so appreciative of Mary too. But I'm Penelope, and yes, I am heading Western New York NORML at this point and out near Buffalo. So I'm, director of community engagement with the cannabis community, and have been working, like Mary said, really close with NORML, and just appreciate them for opening up the medical aspects. I began as a patient, saw the needs, and just felt I had no other choice than to become an advocate for not only myself, but others across the state, and just bring their voices and my own to that table. And just appreciate you all, and let's see what we can go over and help people understand the changes that we've got in New York. So some really good ones.
Cool. Yeah, before we actually start looking at the document itself, is there anything you want to point to that you're most excited about? Any changes in this Article 3 regarding medical cannabis?
Is this directed for me?
Yeah, yes, Penelope, yeah.
I think probably as a whole, I think one of the most exciting things that I've seen is that the physicians can now determine if you are eligible. So you're not stuck to this one list. That was almost above and beyond, at some point it was so hard to choose what do we really press and fight for. And to see that included was beyond what I expected, to be honest. So.
And so just a little bit more for folks who may not be familiar, that means that how is that different than what was previously in the medical program?
Previously, we had an actual list of conditions, of qualifying conditions. So you had to find a physician who would agree or find something in there that you could fit on if you didn't just have, one specific underlying condition. For example, a gentleman, it's always touched me that I had met him, he had Tourette's syndrome. Cannabis helped him so much. And he wanted to have a valid card. He wanted to be able to get into a dispensary, see what was there. His condition is not on the list. And it's very, very common that it helps people with Tourette's syndrome. So that really was a difficult situation. Chronic pain, you can fall into a lot of different categories, but it was very specific, and yet, with chronic pain, it was broad. So, how do you get in there? If I've got anxiety, but it's not labeled as PTSD. So now your physician can determine, I think this will help you. Let's try it. So
love that. Thanks for the breakdown there. And so about to bring up the document itself, but just again, folks in the audience, please feel free to drop questions and comments in the chat or in the Q&A. Penelope and Mary, same with y'all. If you have any perspective you want to offer, just jump in, feel free to stop us. Jason and I will probably hand off just back and forth with regards to the read through. And yeah, we're looking to have a conversation. We're practicing our fast forward button for some of the jargon that maybe we don't need to read every line by line, but our goal is to provide a comprehensive analysis of this document so we can level the playing field. So let me just bring up this document and we can begin to dive in. So Article 3, medical cannabis. Some of the primary things we're overviewing in this article is the certification of patients, lawful medical use, identification cards, or registration as a caregiver facility. ROs are registered organizations. Those are the existing operators who are, vertically integrated, cultivating, processing, selling medical cannabis to patients now, as well as moving forward. Reports, the cannabis research license, that's an interesting one. We'll definitely have some good conversation around there. And ROs are registered organizations and adult use cannabis. There's obviously some overlap there given how legalization is unfolded, and giving registered organizations that are currently participating in the medical program access to the adult use program. relationship to other laws, home cultivation, protection for the medical use of cannabis, pricing, etc. So we'll probably get through a portion of this today, and then we'll continue to move forward from there. But let's take it away. So actually, Jason, do you want to start a reading today?
Sure.
Great.
So, certification of patients. A patient certification may only be issued if the patient has a condition which shall be specified in the patient's health record. Practitioner by training or experience is qualified to treat the condition. The patient is under the practitioner's continuing care for the condition, and the practitioner's professional opinion and review of past treatments. The patient is likely to receive therapeutic or palliative benefit from the primary or adjunctive treatment with medical use of cannabis for their condition. It's important to just note that it's a certification. It's not a prescription. Prescription is actually a regulated term, and you can't prescribe Schedule I controlled substances. So that's why physicians certify patients and make recommendations. That's why you see this language, and you should never see, and you won't see in statute or regulation, the word prescription until it would change at the federal level.
And I just want to say, Mary Kruger did drop in the chat a link to the bill. So we're on page 20 if you want to follow alongside us. And Maya, I see your question in the chat regarding, we'll get to that shortly. It'll actually be outlined specifically. So asking, do we have to go with a specialist for cannabis, or can be a primary care doctor? And there's some language in a moment with regards to the training, or how someone can be qualified to be such to designate or recommend cannabis as a practitioner. We'll keep on going forward.
Okay. The certification shall include the name, birth date, address, statement of the condition the patient has, the practitioner's name and information, basically just kind of information reporting to the government.
Yep. What is interesting too is like the specified date. So there is a lot of language around, you get your license, or you get your registration card as a let's say a patient, and it's granted for up to a year. It could also be designated longer if recommended, or shorter. So there is definitely a lot of language around like specified date. Someone would benefit from medical cannabis until a specified date. So just we'll continue to see that, and I just wanted to underline it again.
All right. In making a certification, the practitioner may consider the form of medical cannabis the patient should consume, including the method of consumption, and any particular strain, variety, and quantity or percentage of cannabis or particular active ingredient, and appropriate dosage.
What do y'all think about that? I think it's hopeful, but like that's making a lot of assumptions that doctors have any idea of what's going on in the short term.
I think that's dead on. I mean, I know practitioners that prescribe, and I can tell you that they pretty much know zero of that. I mean, you might have some, like Dr. Metzler out at Dent Neurologic, who has done extensive cannabis research. He may very well know, some of these, if not all of those, but I would say that probably 90, 95, 99% of doctors are going to say, yes, you qualify under the law. I'm comfortable with you having this. Go to the dispensary and take their recommendations.
Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know the exact language, but we had this before.
Yes.
So
yeah.
you were told before even, and hopefully you got a practitioner who said, like you just said, it's up to your consultation or whatever you decide.
I think that is definitely the most common thing, is the doctors just kind of hand it off to the pharmacist at the dispensary. And then at that point, it really becomes more of a personal thing, because, as I'm sure most people on this conference know, the same product could affect two different people very differently. So it's really going to be this, certain people have had this effect, but you need to tell us how it's been affecting you, and then we can adjust from there. So it's cannabis is in its infancy in terms of knowing its efficacy in certain things, its effects on other things, and it's really just kind of trial and error until you find the right thing for you. You know, people can kind of guide you into a particular thing, but maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, and you're going to need to tweak things. But hopefully with the research license and things like that, we start to get more and more information, and doctors can be more and more specific.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. Every practitioner shall consult and the prescription monitoring program registry prior to making or issuing a certification for the purpose of reviewing a patient's controlled substance history. I know for a fact, you know, that some, especially like pain clinics, that if you've been going for opioids, you know, you have chronic pain and you're taking opioids, a lot of them will make you sign a statement that says you will not take illicit drugs or cannabis or something like that. Now, I don't know how that particularly changes with the recreational use and things like that, but I know that has been a hurdle for some patients is if they're in the pain clinic, you know, it's not good. Even if the goal is to get somebody off of opioids, it's never good to stop cold turkey. You know, the withdrawal from that is terrible, but essentially patients sometimes are presented with only that option. If you want to use cannabis under a medical program, you have to stop cold the opioid prescription because they will cut you off at the pain clinic. So it puts patients in a very, very difficult situation.
I think those are all great points. I also want to just address a couple comments in the chat. Richard Glazer says, at least to us, like there's definitely an opportunity for value add at the dispensary with regards to helping people identify the strain, the methodology, et cetera. You know, in adult use markets, they often call that like the bud tender, someone who can recommend what you're looking for. But of course, taking it a bit farther, especially in the medical, definitely an opportunity for either businesses or entrepreneurs. Matt De La Porta says, even the basics like a minimum effective dose of THC are not widely known. That's a huge thing when it comes to recommendations. And we actually just saw, I'm going to blank out on the formal federal entity name, but there is now a recommendation for a standard dosing methodology of 5 milligrams as a baseline standard dose, 5 milligrams of THC as a standard dose to begin to develop research on cannabis, because there's so, as the framework has been established, and especially with prohibition, it's been all over the place. There's no standardization or methodology for this kind of research in the United States specifically. So when we see a recommendation like that from a federal entity, still, obviously still Schedule 1, but in advising, recommending a basic dose, that doesn't mean people can't go above or below, but I think that having this 5 milligram dose to begin to build research off of will be very informing.
Well, and it'll be interesting too when you put things in the context of like micro dosing, they're looking into psilocybin, LSD micro dosing for certain treatment of conditions that really have no, intoxicating effect, but have an effect on the condition. So, there could be that route too. It's really a new area, and it's kind of exciting to see it all develop. All right, we're moving on. Let's go to number 5. The practitioner shall give the certification to the certified patient and place a copy in the patient's health record. No practitioner shall issue a certification under this section for themselves.
Noted.
Yeah. Physicians should not be prescribing themselves any medications. That's pretty much an ethical requirement. So makes sense that that's in there.
Yep.
A registry identification card based on certification shall expire in 1 year after the date the certification is signed by the practitioner, except as provided for in subdivision 8.
I do want to address one thing. So Julia asked the question. There's no language in here saying a patient must stop all opioids if given a certification for medical marijuana, but it is a discussion that if someone is already accessing pain reduction therapy through through a clinic that is prescribing opioids, there may be, we're not so clear on if someone tests positive for THC, will they still be able to attend the opioid clinic that they're receiving, the pain clinic that they're operating under.
A lot of times they'll have to sign a contract. So, that's one way. If they didn't sign a contract, that's something you need to talk with the doctor. But a lot of times they will literally sign a contract saying you are not taking any other type of substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, NORML has definitely tried educating around that, because there are providers who don't even recognize that medical marijuana, when there still were qualifying conditions, that opioid replacement therapy was a qualifying condition for the medical marijuana program. So there's a growing body of research that shows that marijuana can actually be used as an exit drug from those harder drugs. So I think it really is dependent on the provider that you're going to and what their policies are that they have in place around, substances that folks can use.
And I
It
can't
happened to me with my primary. So I was forced off, and that was just the policy at the time of Rochester Regional Health System. I don't know if it's changed yet. But yeah, they made me sign a contract, and then I turned around and I said, give that back. And I ripped it up in front of them, but, and I left. But so, yeah, you got to check into your, the providers that you are using.
And I think that I remember Dr. Menschler from Dent Neurologic presenting at, I think it was a continuing legal education, where he said some statistic, and I want to say it was like 50% or more or something like that, he had chronic pain patients who are on opioids either substantially reduce or get off of opioids because of switching to medical marijuana. I mean, it was a very large number. So, definitely, but he is a very specialized doctor and has embraced medical marijuana. So, a lot of doctors, they get zero training, or I think, as we'll see, they have to take, I can't remember now if it's a 2 or 4 hour course. It definitely used to be 4 hours, might have reduced since then. But that's it. And according to doctors that I've spoken to, the course is not helpful. Like, it's not helpful in training a doctor how to prescribe and when to prescribe and how it's, effective and things like that. It's really more of like, here's the legalities of it. So, it's, I think, important if you're really looking for the medical benefits to find a doctor who really understands the medical side of it. Okay, section 8. If the practitioner states in the certification that, in the practitioner's professional opinion, the patient would benefit from medical cannabis only until a specified earlier date, then the registry identification card shall expire on that date. If the practitioner states in the certification that the practitioner's professional opinion that the patient is terminally ill and that the certification shall not expire until the patient dies, and the registry identification card shall state that the patient is terminally ill and the registration card shall not expire until the patient dies. If the practitioner reissues a certification to terminate the certification on an earlier date, then the registry identification card shall expire on that date and shall promptly be destroyed by the certified patient. If the certification so provides, the registry identification card shall state any recommendation or limitation by the practitioner as to the form or forms of medical cannabis or dosage for certified patients. And the board shall make regulations implementing a subdivision. Number 9.
It's interesting, like the previous medical card, I've had my medical card for a few years due to chronic back pain associated with a former illness. And I didn't have anything specifying on my card up in this point. Like it doesn't lay out what I can or cannot have. So it's interesting that they're requiring, how many bullet points can you fit in on this? Like if it says what products you can or cannot have, what the recommended uses are, or the why, it just seems like they're offering a lot to put onto a pretty small card.
Well, I think, didn't it say that they may, right? Go up for a second, Zach.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a form that they give you when you're first certified. Maybe you don't recall getting it, Zach, and then it had your provider on there and such. And then you hand that into your dispensary. It goes into the records, and then everybody can go into that database and see what you can have as a patient.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking about the identification card, like with your ID, your face on it. So
yeah, because the doctor, like if you were, let's say, being treated for lung cancer, maybe the doctor, and now that smokable medical cannabis is legal, as we'll see, maybe the doctor is going to say, no, I am not certifying the patient to smoke this because they're a lung cancer patient. So it could be things like that. I think for the most part, though, I haven't heard of too many people being restricted on the forms. Although, to be fair, up until very recently, we were extraordinarily restricted on the form. So you really kind of had 2 or 3 choices, you know,
Right.
so there really weren't that many restrictions that could be placed on you because you're already pretty restricted.
True. Okay, cool.
What are we on, 9?
Yep.
All right. A certification may be a special certification if, in addition to the other requirements for a certification, the practitioner certifies that in the certification that the patient's condition is progressive and degenerative, or that delay in the patient's certified medical use of cannabis poses a risk to the patient's life or health. The office shall create a form to be used for special certifications and shall make the form available to be downloaded from the office's website. Number 10, prior to issuing a certification, a practitioner must complete at minimum a 2-hour course as determined by the board in regulations. So I'm pretty sure that used to be 4-hour.
Yeah.
They've since cut it down. For the purpose of this article, a person's status as a practitioner is deemed to be a license for the purpose of section 3390 of the public health law and shall be subject to the same revocation process.
So Maya, I think that answers your question that your primary care doctor could hold a license, but they'd have to do a 2-hour course as determined by the board.
And you can go, I guess, I mean, now I'm pretty sure it's still on the Department of Health, but maybe it'll get transferred to OCM at some point. You can go on and see all the doctors who are certified who elect to be listed. Doctors can not be listed if they choose to. But they do have a list of all the practitioners that have chosen to be listed who are certified to make recommendations for patients. So,
And I did send that link through in the chat a few minutes ago to that
Great.
list on the Department of Health website.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary. All right, I can pick up the next section.
cool.
So number 31, or section 31, lawful medical use. The possession, acquisition, use, delivery, transfer, transportation, or administration of medical cannabis by a certified patient, designated caregiver, or the employees of a designated caregiver facility for certified medical use shall be lawful under this article, provided that 1, the cannabis that may be possessed by certified patient shall not exceed a 60-day supply of the dosage determined by the practitioner. I think that's an interesting number. So a 2-month supply, consistent with any guidance and regulations issued by the board, provided that during the last 7 days of any 60-day period, the certified patient may also possess up to such amount for the next 60-day period. So if I'm reading that correctly, are you able to have up to 120 days worth in a given time period, or is it?
Well, it's provided that during the last 7 days of any 60-day period, the certified patient may also possess such amount for the next 60 days. So at most you would be like, what is that, 67 days
67
worth?
days, yeah.
Basically, so that you're never running out. You can at least pre-plan by a week.
Yep, okay, that's good clarification there. And it's interesting too, because, you know, when we see adult use, you know, anyone can hold up to 3 ounces legally, you know,
In public.
In public, and at home, you know, you can have up to X amount of 5 pounds. So looking at a 60-day supply, we're going to see specifically what that means with regards to if you buy medical product, it has to live in its container that you purchased it in. So a 60-day supply must remain in its medical purchase container for that entire time, which is just interesting. So I think that's the way they would differentiate. Yeah, I see Penelope shaking their head, and I also shake my head. I think.
Well, it's completely silly. We have adult use grow.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
And we have a question. Will this cover if one travels with their medicine? Absolutely and unequivocally no. Now, there's a practical of, you know, are you going to get hassled? Probably not, but it really depends. But it is 100% federally legal or federally illegal to step foot on a plane with cannabis. Unequivocally, do not do that. You technically can risk federal prison. Interesting to note that the airport is typically municipal property. So if you're caught within the airport, that's state law. They deal with it however they deal with it, if it's legal, whatever. But stepping foot on an airplane is now federal territory. And It's federally legal. You technically cannot do it. You technically cannot take
Right.
your New York cannabis, medical cannabis, to Massachusetts because you're crossing a state line, which now puts it into a federal category, even though the two states are legal. Are you going to get caught 99, times out of 100? Absolutely not. Technically, it's a federal crime. So just be aware that, if you want to be completely compliant as best you can as a medical patient with laws, it's within New York State. And so, that's the best we can say.
I have two things to add to that. Didn't LAX change their policies in the last year or so where they said that you can fly within California?
To my knowledge, that it doesn't matter because the plane is federal territory. So
Yeah.
that's the point. Like, you could, if they did do that, you could enter LAX and exit LAX, no problem. But if there was an air marshal, let's say, and somehow they figured out you had cannabis on board, you're technically committing a federal crime at that point.
Mm-hmm. And so Jason's point about driving over state lines and also with just not being able to travel in general with medical marijuana, that's the reason why in some states like Massachusetts, like California, there's something called Penelope, what is it?
Reciprocity.
Yeah, reciprocity, which is, in Massachusetts, they'll respect if you have a medical card from New York, they'll still respect you as a medical patient in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, we didn't get that included in this round of the legislation in New York. So we do not have reciprocity in New York. That means if someone from Massachusetts comes to New York with their medical card, we don't respect that they're a medical patient. So definitely that's one piece that there's still work for us to do around in the medical program.
And the point is, just be careful, be aware that technically, if you're doing these things that otherwise seem harmless or just common sense that they should be, you should be able to do, it's still technically federally illegal. And that's the problem that we have to deal with is, the supremacy clause of the Constitution says federal law trumps. They don't have to enforce it, but it is there in the background. So just kind of be aware.
I just want to address something that Matt De La Porta provided in the chat in the Q&A. I'm just referring to in California, back when only medical use was legalized, there were physicians that have revolving door clinics where patients could come in, sit with a doctor for literally 2 minutes, pay a fee for a medical card, and be on their way. Any thoughts on whether we'll see this in New York, and what are the ethics that physicians should consider in this context?
It already exists.
Yeah.
It exists through telemedicine, especially.
Yeah. 2-3 minutes on a Skype call.
45 seconds is my appointment.
Yeah. And $150 later, boom, you got your certification and you're ready to go. So that's already a burgeon, that's already a well-established industry for, I don't know, since probably, the day the law pretty much went into effect, or certainly since it's expanded to like chronic pain and things like that, where it was more qualifying conditions. Yeah, definitely an issue. As to the ethics of it, I think that you would find many practitioners saying that it's not ethical, that they want to know the patient's history, really understand everything, and there's no possible way you could do that in 45 seconds. But it's absolutely available. There's no question. Other question is, do insurance plans cover medical use? Typically, the answer is no. I know that Dr. Metchler had said that he has, for his patients, argued with insurance companies to some extent. It had some success, but pretty much plan on you're paying out of pocket with cash. That's, your insurance company is going to deny it.
Yeah, I've heard from some people that they've been able to get the appointment covered by their insurance if their appointment is made for something else, and then the medical card is a recommendation that's secondary to what their appointment was for. But that's really the only time that I've heard it covered.
Yeah, and you're not like
guaranteed even then.
And the product itself is almost certainly never going to be covered. They're just not going to pay for cannabis. At this point. And do we think it'll change over the next few years? That's going to be federal law, really. I mean, New York State could try to say something, but they would probably, if they weren't extraordinarily careful how they drafted that, it'd get shot down in court, because if they're dealing with insurance companies who cross state lines, they can't mandate the insurance company break federal law. So that would be a big problem. So I don't see that changing until federal law changes.
Yeah, great questions. And there's a Doug, I see your question in the chat, and we'll look at that as we move a little further. Just imagining how this industry, how the medical program will evolve differently from adult use. Okay, number 2, the cannabis that may be possessed by a designated caregiver does not exceed the quantities referred to in subdivision 1 of this section for each certified patient for whom the caregiver possesses a valid registry identification card for up to 4 certified patients. So a caregiver is able to carry, let's just say, I mean, can I go so far as to say a 67-day dose or a 60-day dose for 4 different patients at a given time in the process of giving it to them, so they can have that in their possession, which is interesting. 3, the cannabis that may be possessed by designated caregiver facilities does not exceed the quantities referred to in subdivision 1 for each certified patient under the care or treatment of the facility. So obviously not the difference there. For if you're a facility, it's not you're not limited to 4 patients, certified patients. Whereas if you're a caregiver, then you can only be containing or holding up to 4 patients worth of product. Number 4, the form or forms of medical cannabis that may be possessed by the certified patient, designated caregiver, or designated caregiver facility pursuant to a certification shall be in compliance with any recommendation or limitation by the practitioner as to the form or forms of medical cannabis or dosage for the certified patient in the certification. 5, medical cannabis shall be kept in the original package in which it was dispensed on this article, except for the portion removed for immediate consumption for a certified medical use by a certified patient. I will go so far as to say I hope they're selling in ball jars with humidity packs in there for folks who are having up to 60 days worth of product there. But thinking about getting 60 days worth of product in a not airproof plastic, container, not so interesting. So maybe you'll have to put that airproof or that non-airproof plastic container inside your airproof ball jar to get around this issue. In the case of a designated caregiver facility, the employee assisting the patient has been designated as such by the designated caregiver facility. So pretty standard there. You want to take the cards, Jason?
All right, upon approval of the certification, the office shall issue registry identification cards for certified patients and designated caregivers. A registry identification card shall expire as provided in the article or as otherwise provided in the section. The office shall begin issuing registry identification cards as soon as practicable. After the certifications required by this chapter are granted, the office may specify a form for a registry application, in which case the office shall provide the form on request. Reproductions of the form may be used, and the form shall be available for downloading. Just so people are aware, it's pretty instantaneous. As soon as the doctor uploads the recommendation, then you can get a temporary card, and then New York mails it out. You usually get it 5 to 10 days or something like that. But with that temporary card, you can go to a dispensary. So it really is just dependent on how long it takes from the doctor to finish the appointment and upload the recommendation. And so it's very quick. New York actually has that process remarkably streamlined. And for New York, that's a huge step. All right. To obtain, amend, or renew a registration or registry identification card, a certified patient or designated caregiver shall file a registry application with the office unless otherwise exempted by the board and regulation. The application or renewal application shall include, in the case of a certified patient, a patient certification, a new written
sorry to interrupt you, Jason, but this stuff's all pretty standard. It's literally saying, like, if you change anything, you have to notify them, and your old card has to be gotten rid of. You have to destroy if you have a change and you're getting a new card, your old card has to be destroyed. And that change could be your name, it could be the not your name, well, it could be your name, but your address, who's your caretaker, et cetera. There's a bunch of things, like any of the data that was inputted on the initial intake form that has changed, you're required to make a change yourself and destroy your old card. So just, that's
Fast
kind of a
forward.
yep, that's our fast forward button right there. So there's, it designates a new caregiver. Yep, these are all pretty standard here. So if we go down to 3.
Where a certified patient is under the age of 18 or otherwise incapable of consent, the application for a registry identification card shall be made by the person responsible for making healthcare decisions for the patients. The designated caregiver shall be a parent, guardian of the certified patient, a person designated by the parent or guardian, an employee of a designated caregiver facility, including a cannabis research license holder or appropriate person approved by the office upon sufficient showing that no parent or legal guardian is approved or is appropriate or available. So you can be less than 18, but you got to have some type of authorization from somebody who can make that judgment call, which is good. Cannabis, if it's medically approved, should be available to those who need it, regardless of age. No person may be a designated caregiver if they're under 21 years of age, unless a sufficient showing is made to the office that the person should be permitted to serve as a designated caregiver. The requirements of such showing shall be determined by the board. No person may be a designated caregiver for more than 4 certified patients at one time, provided, however, the limitation shall not apply to designated caregiver facilities or cannabis research license holder.
I'm curious, so that's at one time, how long is that window of time? Is it, so I guess if your name is on cards, if you're designated as a caregiver, I guess it's the window of whatever the individuals who have their cards or registration cards. So some person might be 6 months, a person might be a year, one may be indefinite. And then it's kind of a play-by-play, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you're designated to the state as the caregiver, then it's up to 4, or not if you're a facility or a research license holder.
Yep.
I think one.
Oh, go ahead.
This sort of ties in. We've mentioned, underage being able to have medical cannabis. So something that we've been working on looking at, Mary, you can go into this probably deeper, is do we have, we don't see where the child can get their medication on school grounds. So that's something we need to work on and get legislation in place there for that. So the caregiver can actually dispense or somebody who's given that authority.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're at 6.
Yep.
All right. If a certified patient wishes to change or terminate his or her designated caregiver for whatever reason, the certified patient shall notify the office as soon as practicable. The office shall issue a notification to the designated caregiver that their registration card is invalid and must be promptly destroyed. The newly designated caregiver must comply with all the requirements.
Yep.
If the certification so provides, a registry identification card shall contain any recommendation or limitation by the practitioner as to the forms of medical cannabis or dosage for the certified patient. The office shall issue separate registry identification cards for certified patients and designated caregivers as soon as reasonably practicable after receiving a complete application under this section, unless it determines that the application is incomplete or factually inaccurate. If the application of a certified patient designates an individual as a caregiver who is not authorized to be a designated caregiver, that portion of the application shall be denied by the office, but shall not affect the approval of the balance of the application.
So in what case would y'all imagine, are we talking about someone who's under 21 or under 18 who couldn't be designated? Where else, I'm curious if y'all have thoughts as who else might not be authorized to be a designated caregiver?
I think you could do, this is the legal term, mentally incompetent people. That could be the case. I would say that that's probably underage. Like if it was a parent that was the patient and their child who was, call it 16 or something like that, who could go to the facility maybe unless a showing to the board said otherwise, that might be denied, things like that.
Yeah, there's Julia asked possibly like felon. I haven't seen any language around that, but that's.
I don't know that felons are restricted from, I don't know. I don't really know the criminal
I
side.
would be surprised to see that language in this legislation to restrict a felon from being a caretaker, just with the way that other things are written in here.
The next part is, everything that the registration or the card contains on it. I don't, Zach, do you want to skip through that part, or do you want to go through it?
Yeah, it's all pretty standard information. If there's anything, I don't think there's anything that stands out. It's literally like an ID card. It's got your picture on it. It's got your recommended information on it, basic details, your designated caregiver, etc.
Yep. Let's see.
Yeah, including, plainly state any recommendation or limitation designated by the practitioner, etc. So
right.
I think we're 11.
11, a certified patient or designated caregiver who has been issued a registry identification card shall notify the office of any change in his or her name or address. With
Standard. Yep.
Number 12, a certified patient or designated caregiver loses their card, they need to notify the office within 10 days of losing the card. They'll get a new one. The office shall maintain a confidential list of persons to whom it has issued a registry identification card. Individual identifying information obtained by the office under this article shall be confidential and exempt from disclosure laws under Article 6 of the Public Officers Law. So you are technically on a governmental list, but they won't disclose anything. The board shall verify to law enforcement personnel in the appropriate case whether a registry identification card is valid and any other relevant information necessary to protect the patient's rights to medical cannabis by confirming compliance with this article. That, while important, is less important now that there's adult use, because now you in general can possess legally, so it wouldn't come up as often, but there will be cases where, like, medical or, very obvious case of if you're under 21. And have a medical card, but you wouldn't qualify for adult use. What are we on? 13?
I think 14.
Oh, that was the law enforcement. 15.
Oh, yep, sorry, 15. Yep.
If a certified patient or designated caregiver willfully violates any provision of this article as determined by the board, his or her certification and registry identification card may be suspended or revoked. This is in addition to any other penalty. The board shall make regulations for special certifications, which we have kind of discussed already. I think we should skip down to section 33 unless you have any objections.
No, I'm also thinking we got 10 more minutes left. I want to see if anyone has any questions. I also know, Jason, you're part of a conference next Tuesday that maybe we could provide an opportunity to share some information about. We talked about postponing next week's workshop just because there's going to be an incredible opportunity to hear some of the folks who are behind the scenes directing this rollout of legalization. But yeah, before we go into what's on the horizon, Penelope, Mary, y'all have anything you want to add? Or like, there's been a few things in the chat we could all address, like where do we see this evolving, the medical market evolving? So happy to bring that. And if folks out in the audience have any questions, this is a great time for that as well.
I don't have much to add other than what we've already talked about so far. I'm not sure about Penelope though.
Great.
I mean, in the future, I see us, working at getting zero tax, and the benefit of you having your medical card now is you're not going to pay that recreational side tax. So that's something to keep in mind, because people say, well, why bother? Well, there's one good reason there. We're also hoping, pardon?
5 times higher or more on the recreational side. So FYI.
Right. So, and we're hoping that we're going to have higher standards on the medical side, working on standardized, testing and labs and, making sure that we have, the accurate information there. Not sure what we're going to be looking at with our ROs here on the other side. So,
Yeah, and I'll add to that, in the immediate, the biggest benefit I see is one, access to regulated products faster than we're going to have with the adult use market, right? Like if you get your card now, you're going to have access to that product much sooner than waiting for the adult use market to open up. And also the home cultivation, I think, is the biggest benefit of getting your medical card sooner. Because for medical, if you hold a medical card, you will be able to start growing within 6 months after the bill was passed. So October 1st at the latest is when we'll be able to start growing for medical. Whereas adult use, it's 18 months after the first legal sale is made in the adult use market. It could be up to 18 months after that first sale. So that's a long time out for home cultivation for adult use. For folks who are wanting to grow, definitely getting into the medical program is a benefit.
I would actually say the biggest benefit is you're protected under New York State human rights law. That means that you are disabled under the human rights law, which means that in order, if you were to ever have an adverse consequence from having medical cannabis, there needs to be reasonable accommodations. So if, an employer says, hey, we can't have you doing this, they need to be able to make reasonable accommodations. Sometimes reasonable accommodations cannot be made, but you have that chance. Where under adult use, there's no need for that reasonable accommodation portion. So, it's treated as if you were in a wheelchair or something like that, where you are protected under the New York State human rights law. That is a huge advantage for medical that adult use doesn't have. Adult use is more like alcohol, where you have a right to use it, but that right isn't necessarily protected the way using medication.
Yeah, that's great. There's a question in the Q&A from Maya. How can we help now? Volunteer, where is the local community? So we have 2 local community organizers on this call right now who I'm sure could help point y'all in the right direction. So Penelope, Mary, if you guys want to offer anything there.
Yeah, I will throw in the chat the ROC NORML website, and specifically the page where you can go to sign up for our email list or become a ROC NORML member, and just stay up to date on the things that we're doing, the events that we're holding, information that we're putting out there, from the consumer advocacy piece of it, and then we'll, direct you to HempLab for the licensing piece of it.
I'm typing something real quick too, so for contact.
Great. And
for those who can't see the chat, it's just rocnorml.org/join, and that's ROCNORML.
We have a Western New York now. It's just Western New York. What is it? Western WNYNORML .org. I guess we're at. So we just got a new website up. So and you can just email me to it, Penelope at thecannabiscommunity.org.
Great. And there was a question about previously recorded information, or we have a pretty long list of programming out there. And so I'm just going to, let me see if I can find a link. We will, at the very least, we'll do a follow-up email. Everyone on this call will get a link to all the previous recordings, and HempLab has a lot of content on our YouTube channel from all the different awesome conversations we had over the years. So it's a gold mine if you feel like digging. Great. Well, we'll leave it. Anyone else have any more questions they'd like to share? I want to give just one more little breath there.
We can address real quick. I know you guys haven't gotten into the home cultivation, but just so that person knows who wrote in the chat, they were asking about restrictions in adult use home grow. It's exactly the same for medical. There's no difference. So whatever it's stated for adult use is the same for a medical patient on the home cultivation side. So there's, there's going to be no difference. So when, Jason and Zach and Mary go through that section.
Which to my knowledge, it was, or to my recollection, it was, if you're an individual, 3 mature, 3 immature. If you're 21 and over. And if you're in a household with 2 or more people, 21 and over, it's a total of 12 plants per household, 6 mature, 6 immature.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think there's possibility for us to see additional rules and regulations put in place around adult use home cultivation. Just keeping that in mind that, you know, when we saw the governor's proposal of the CRTA, his legalization bill, there was some language in there around needing to register as for home cultivation, and then it gave, you know, I forget which entity it was, but it essentially allowed, maybe it was law enforcement, to come into your house to inspect at any time to make sure that you were in compliance with the regulations that were put in place. So I just mentioned that to say that, you know, there's the possibility of seeing regulations proposed like that, and NORML as an entity is definitely keeping a close eye on that, because that's unacceptable from a consumer rights perspective to have that type of regulation put in place.
Yeah, definitely. And caregivers, yes, will be allowed to grow. That's one of the huge benefits that we got with the medical, and for the 4 patients that they can do. So that is a real huge benefit. And, you know, maybe we can look into, I don't know, community and co-op. I don't know. I would love to see how we can go in on this, you know, with regulation. So that's why we're not growing right now. They need to set those regulations. Is it going to have to be locked up behind a fence, outside, inside, you know?
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see those regulations start to come out and what people can do to comply. I mean, you know, even if we just look at hemp, you know, if you wanted to grow hemp outdoors, it had to be behind security, and, you know, you had to have all types of security. I can't possibly imagine them doing that for home cultivation for medical patients, but I mean, that's what they did for hemp, which is not going to get you high for the most part. So, you know, that's kind of where we're starting off from. So it'll be very interesting, because, you know, they clearly are going to be concerned about your neighbor coming over if you're growing outside and just grabbing some off, like, especially if it was a kid or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that while still making sure that it is accessible for all the patients.
Great. Well, obviously we have lots to talk about. You know, I definitely hope we can get Penelope and Mary back on the follow-up. It seems like this medical section will take at least another workshop. We will follow up with regards to, Jason, you want to do a quick plug for next Tuesday's event that you're participating in?
Right. So Monroe County Bar Association is putting on a continuing legal education course. It is free to all non-lawyers. Go to mcba.org. Hold on. Put it in the chat, mcba.org. It's in the, you can just find the event on the May 18th. It's from 10 to 11:30, I believe. Axel Burnaby from the governor's office, Senator Jeremy Cooney, myself, and a local public defender will be talking about the law. I think Axel is covering more of the regulatory kind of OCM side of it. Senator Cooney is going to be looking more at the social justice, and him and I are also going to be looking at the business opportunities. And then I am also going to be doing an ethics piece for lawyers, which probably won't be interesting to most people. It's not interesting to lawyers either. And then the public defender is going to be talking about the criminal law and how that changed with the MRTA.
Excellent.
Great.
Yeah, definitely going to be an incredible resource for the community. We'll be sure to share that up in our follow-up email as well as our email blast, and we'll confirm whether or not we'll have programming next week. But no matter what, we got a nice road ahead of us as we continue to digest the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Penelope. Thank you, Mary. And thank you everyone in the audience, both on social media as well as on the Zoom call. We're grateful to have you in our company, and we're excited that you're excited, and we'll keep moving forward together. So everybody have a great day, have a great week, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you all. See you later.